Reality television has a particular talent for finding people who want to be seen and then showing the audience far more than anyone involved originally planned to reveal. Darcey and Stacey Silva arrived on 90 Day Fiancé as supporting characters in someone else's story and became, over the course of several years and multiple spin-off series, two of the most discussed, most dissected, and most persistently present figures the franchise had ever produced. They were not cast for their stability or their conventional attractiveness or their professional accomplishments. They were cast because they were interesting, and they turned out to be far more interesting than any producer who first pointed a camera at them could have predicted, in ways that were sometimes joyful and sometimes painful and sometimes both simultaneously. The story of how they got to where they are in 2025 is not a simple story about cosmetic surgery or failed relationships or the particular cruelty of comment sections. It is a story about two women who came from something real, built something public from it, and then watched that public thing take on a life that gradually became difficult to separate from whatever they had actually been before the cameras arrived. Darcey and Stacey Silva were born on September 23, 1974, in Middletown, Connecticut, into a family with deep roots in the entertainment and creative industries. Their father, Mike Silva, had himself experienced time in the spotlight as a co-host on the syndicated talk show The Mike and Maddie Show, and their mother, Nancy Silva, had worked in professional dance. The creative environment the twins grew up in shaped both of them in ways that only became fully visible when they found themselves in front of cameras of their own. The family established House of 11, a fashion design and entertainment company, in Los Angeles, and both twins were involved in its operations before any reality television opportunity materialized. They had also founded the production company 11th Entertainment and sold a pilot called White Girl to A&E, a romantic comedy about twins that never went to series but demonstrated a clear ambition toward entertainment careers that predated their reality fame by years. When 90 Day Fiancé came along, it was not their first attempt at making something of themselves on camera. It was simply the attempt that worked in a way none of the previous ones had. Darcey's introduction to the 90 Day Fiancé audience came through her relationship with Jessie Meester, a 24-year-old model and personal trainer from Amsterdam who was 15 years her junior. She was 41 years old at the time of filming and was a mother of two daughters, Anniko and Aspen, from her previous marriage to Frank Bollock. The relationship with Jessie was conducted across an international distance and across a gap in age and temperament that made it one of the more volatile the franchise had documented. Meester was confident, deliberate, and willing to criticize Darcey on camera in ways that made many viewers uncomfortable. She was emotionally expressive, prone to tears during difficult conversations, and visibly invested in the relationship to a degree that many observers felt he did not reciprocate at an equivalent level. The relationship did not survive into a K-1 visa application. When Darcey returned to the franchise to document a subsequent relationship, she did so with a British man named Tom Brooks, who had been in contact with her through social media after watching her on the show. That relationship also did not result in a successful engagement or immigration petition. The pattern that emerged across both documented relationships was one that the show's producers and its audience both recognized. Darcey Silva genuinely wanted love, was not performing that want for the cameras, and was encountering men whose relationship with her was shaped, at least in part, by what being with someone on a popular television show offered in terms of visibility and opportunity. The question of whether Jessie Meester or Tom Brooks had genuinely been in love with her or had been primarily interested in the platform her presence on the show represented has never been answered definitively from any fully reliable source. But it was asked repeatedly in the years following both relationships by people who had watched them unfold. Stacey's storyline on the franchise and its spin-offs ran in parallel with Darcey's, centered around her relationship with Albanian singer Florian Sukic, who was 11 years younger than her. The couple married in October 2020 in Connecticut in a ceremony that was filmed for the television record, making Stacey the first of the twins to reach the marital milestone that the franchise's entire format is built around. The marriage produced its own documented difficulties almost immediately. In 2021, a woman named Shaden Rooks filed a lawsuit against Stacey alleging that Stacey had sent threatening messages in connection with her relationship with Florian. Stacey denied having sent threatening messages and the case was eventually dropped. Photographs of Florian with other women appeared online in 2022 and generated significant media coverage and audience discussion. Both Stacey and Florian maintained publicly that they were working through the difficulties in the marriage. The element of both women's public presence that has generated the most sustained commentary, more than any relationship or legal development, is the visible transformation of their physical appearances across the years of their television exposure. When Darcey first appeared on 90 Day Fiancé, she was recognizably herself. An attractive woman in her early 40s with the specific look of someone who takes care of herself and has access to the aesthetic resources that Connecticut's suburban prosperity provides. Across subsequent seasons of the spin-off Darcey and Stacey, which premiered on TLC in 2020, both women's appearances changed significantly, with alterations to their facial features, lips, and bodies that the show itself documented in part. Both women have traveled to Turkey multiple times for procedures, and the show's filming has accompanied those trips, incorporating the medical tourism into the narrative of the series. Both women have discussed their approach to cosmetic procedures in interviews with varying degrees of specificity. They have described the procedures as choices made for their own confidence and on their own terms. In a March 2024 appearance on the Tamron Hall show, Darcey declined to confirm or deny specific procedures while speaking about looking and feeling her best. Critics of their approach have argued, with increasing directness across social media and in fan forums, that the cumulative effect of the visible changes across several years of filming represents something worth examining more carefully than the sisters themselves have been willing to do on camera. Plastic surgeons interviewed by entertainment publications have speculated about the specific procedures likely involved based on visible changes, without having any direct knowledge of the women's actual medical histories. Rodrigo Ruiz, the Brazilian man Darcey met after her relationship with Tom Brooks ended, represented the next chapter in her documented romantic life. The relationship was followed across episodes of the spin-off and eventually produced an engagement. The engagement with Ruiz was subsequently broken off, as were the two relationships that preceded it. At this point in the narrative of her public life, the romantic endings had become a pattern that the audience was watching with a complicated mixture of sympathy, frustration, and the specific kind of investment that people develop in stories that keep failing to resolve. The comment sections on her social media were unkind with a consistency that suggested a portion of the audience had moved from hoping she would find what she was looking for to something closer to entertainment at her expense. TLC cancelled Darcey and Stacey in 2024, a decision that ended a show that had run for 5 seasons since 2020. The network's reasoning was not made public in any detailed statement. The show's ratings had declined across its later seasons, which was a contributing factor in most network cancellation decisions, but the specific internal calculations that led to the decision remain between the twins and the network rather than in any public record. Both women expressed disappointment at the cancellation through their social media channels. Darcey posted content that reflected on what the show had meant to her and to her family. Stacey's response was similar in tone. In the period following the cancellation, both women continued to develop their individual platforms across social media and through House of 11. Their Instagram followings remained substantial, with Darcey maintaining approximately 3.5 million followers and Stacey approximately 2 million. The fashion brand had developed a range of products including clothing lines, and both women were active in promoting those products to their audiences through sponsored content and direct commerce. Their father Mike Silva continued to be involved in the family's creative and commercial enterprises, making public appearances at events and supporting his daughter's ventures through his own social media presence. The specific quality of what Darcey and Stacey Silva faced in 2024 and 2025 was not simply the end of a television show. It was the specific challenge that faces anyone who has built an identity significantly around a public platform when that platform is removed. The work of being Darcey and Stacey Silva, the brand maintenance, the content creation, the public visibility management, had become a full-time occupation during the years of the show's production. When the show ended, the work of being those people continued, but without the structural support of a network production schedule, a camera crew, and an editing team to shape the raw material of their lives into something broadcast-ready. What remained was social media, which rewards volume and immediate emotional response rather than the slower rhythms of long-form production. What has been documented about Darcey's personal life in the period following the TLC cancellation reflects someone continuing to pursue the same fundamental things she had been pursuing since her first appearance on the franchise: romantic partnership, family, professional accomplishment, and the specific kind of visibility that comes from being recognizable to a large audience. In late 2024 and into 2025, she was linked romantically to a man named Georgy Rusev, and there were public appearances together that her followers noted on social media. The relationship did not generate the same level of sustained media coverage that her earlier franchise relationships had, partly because the absence of a television structure removed the context that had made those earlier relationships into extended public narratives. Stacey and Florian's marriage remained the subject of audience scrutiny through 2025, with fans tracking their social media for evidence of whether the difficulties documented across multiple spin-off seasons had been resolved into something more stable. Both maintained public social media presences that presented a version of their life together, and both refrained from the kind of detailed public accounting of the marriage's internal state that would have given audiences the definitive answer many of them were looking for: whether the marriage was functioning in 2025 in a way that either party found satisfying, or whether it was being maintained primarily as a professional arrangement that served both people's ongoing visibility and commercial interests, was not something either of them chose to address directly. The specific category of fame that Darcey and Stacey Silva occupy is one that did not exist in its current form before social media and reality television combined to create it. They are not actresses or musicians or athletes. They are not entrepreneurs in the way that the word is typically applied to people who have built businesses from original products or services. They are people who became famous primarily for being themselves in front of cameras, and who then built commercial enterprises around the audience that the cameras created. The House of 11 brand, the fashion lines, the sponsored content, the appearance fees, all of it depends on the continued relevance of their names to the audience that reality television created. When TLC cancelled the show that was generating the most direct pipeline between their lives and that audience, the underlying business model was not destroyed, but it was made more difficult to sustain at the level it had been operating. The public commentary directed at both women across the years of their television exposure represents one of the more unpleasant dimensions of the story of what fame of this specific kind actually costs the people it touches. The comment sections of their social media posts, the Reddit threads dedicated to their franchise, and the YouTube channels built around analyzing their lives all contain, alongside genuine engagement and expressions of goodwill, a quantity of negative commentary about their appearances, their romantic choices, their parenting, their intelligence, and their professional decisions that would be difficult to read without the kind of protective distance that public figures must develop or be harmed by. Both women have addressed the online criticism in occasional posts and interviews. Darcey has spoken about seeking therapy and working on her mental health in ways that acknowledge the specific weight of maintaining a public presence while also managing personal difficulties. Stacey has made similar comments in her own public communications. Darcey's daughters Aniko and Aspen, who were children when their mother first appeared on television, are now young adults. Both have maintained social media presences that connect them to the audience their mother built. The transition of their visibility from being children in the background of their mother's story to being public figures in their own right is one of the less examined dimensions of what the family's years of television exposure actually produced. Aniko has been photographed with Darcey at public events and was present for some of the filming of Darcey and Stacey. Aspen has similarly maintained a public social media presence. What the experience of growing up with a mother whose romantic life was documented in detail across multiple seasons of national television does to children who become adults with their own relationships to negotiate is not something that any of the coverage of the franchise has examined with any depth. The specific tragedy that is available in the documented story of Darcey and Stacey Silva is not, despite what the most reductive version of this narrative would have it, primarily about cosmetic procedures or bad relationships or the cancellation of a television show. It is about something more fundamental, which is the specific difficulty of being a person in the world whose image has been shaped for years by external forces with their own interests, and then having to figure out what remains of the original person once those external forces have moved on to something else. The 90-Day Fiancé franchise did not create Darcey and Stacey Silva. They came to it with history, with children, with a father who had navigated his own version of television fame, with a fashion business they had been building for years, and with ambitions that long predated their first appearance on the show. What the franchise did was surround all of that with cameras and audience expectations and a brand identity, specifically the Darcey and Stacey brand, that both women have spent years working to maintain. The specific tragedy that is available in the documented story of Darcey and Stacey Silva is not, despite what the most reductive version of this narrative would have it, primarily about cosmetic procedures or bad relationships or the cancellation of a television show. It is about something more fundamental, which is the specific difficulty of being a person in the world whose image has been shaped for years by external forces with their own interests, and then having to figure out what